39 past the hour. Joining us now, ranking member of the Finance Committee Subcommittee on Health Care, Democratic Senator Debbie Stabenow of Michigan. She recently introduced bipartisan legislation to extend funding for the Children's Health Insurance Program for 5 years. Great to have you on the show. Can you believe we're here again? I mean,
It's unbelievable, actually. You know, what I wish we were here talking about is the fact that the Children's Health Insurance Program runs out the end of the week. Health center funding runs out to the end of the week. We've had bipartisan efforts going on to lower costs for health care, increase coverage, which is what we ought to be doing. And instead, here we are again.
A repeal and replace.
Here we are again. Any chance that this is going to pass?
I doubt it. I mean, but they're changing it again today. I go back today to a Finance Committee hearing on the original bill, which they are now changing again.
Right.
And everything we've seen is it's only worse. It completely takes away any semblance of trying to deal with pre-existing conditions without having costs go through the roof.
Right.
And, you know, I have to just give one example from Michigan. The numbers, here's what we know. When this thing would be fully phased in, we would see $140 billion in lost health care funding for coverage. And the state budget that the governor just signed is only $56 billion. And so when they say the states are going to make up the money, there's not a chance.
No way. Gene Robinson's in Washington and has a question. Gene.
Senator, I'm curious about the atmosphere inside the Senate these days. You know, we always thought of the Senate as a special and distinguished place, and it just seems so chaotic and ad hoc. How is this affecting the 100 members of the world's greatest deliberative body?
Well, Eugene, it is chaotic, totally chaotic, and maddening on health care when you look at the fact that they're treating it like a political chess game instead of the fact that it represents people's lives. Can you take your child to the doctor? Can you get your cancer treatments? What about your mom's Alzheimer's? I mean, these are real things for real people, and they keep moving things around so they can just say they got a political win and check the box. And it's very frustrating. We came back in September with Lamar Alexander, Patty Murray, many of us sitting down to say how we're going to fix and stabilize health care. In the Finance Committee, we put together a great bipartisan agreement with Orrin Hatch, Ron Wyden, myself, and others to extend children's health care. And the rug got pulled out from under us. And here we are right back again. And these things that people care about, 9 million kids get covered under the Children's Health Insurance Program. And that ends this Friday. And we're focused now on how to rip apart the healthcare system.
Mark Alper.
Senator, there have been these efforts with Senator Alexander and other Republicans to try to fix things. Just talking in broad terms, what would that piece of legislation do? Who would it help? Who would it hurt?
Well, first of all, we've got to stabilize the system because costs have been going up. I mean, we know that there are people paying too much on premiums and copays. So guaranteeing that the pieces put in place under the Affordable Care Act are there, the cost-sharing payments. Susan Collins and Bill Nelson have a reinsurance proposal that's very good. Making sure we're doing outreach for young people so that healthier people, younger people are part of the pool so that costs go down. So that piece of it, coupled with extending children's health insurance, health centers, community health centers. Roy Blunt and I have 70 members on a letter indicating we want to extend health center money, bipartisan effort, and that's what we wanted to be done. That's what we want to do before the end of the week, and we're wasting all of our time.
The president probably would support all of that.
I'm sure the president would support all of that. So I hope that Senator McConnell will see the votes aren't there, he'll stop it, and we can go on to these things where we could actually get something done.
So Steve Ratner has some charts on the financial ramifications of the plan.
So there are good reasons why this plan is on life support, as Senator Stabenow said, and we'll just run through some numbers, both financial and impact on real people. So if you start with the financial side of the equation, this is kind of a legislative Trojan horse. It kind of sneaks in and then it sort of gets you. And so you see there are budget cuts over the next 7 or 8 years that are not inconsequential, about $25, $27 billion a year, but not obviously massive in the great scheme of life. But here's what happens in 2027. In 2027, all of the expansion provisions of the Affordable Care Act expire. the subsidies for people who buy on exchanges and the people who buy through Medicare. And so effectively, Obamacare as we know it more or less ends in 2027. If you then look at the impact on real people in the next chart, what you'll see is that while initially the loss of insurance is again in the 15 million range, for reasons I'll explain in a second, eventually it goes to 32 million, which is the full amount of the loss of insurance for people under Obamacare. The reason why more people lose insurance faster than the money goes down is because this bill would eliminate the requirement that you buy insurance. It would eliminate the requirement that
So your
employers provide insurance.
Your number's 32 million?
32 million.
And where does that come from? What's the source?
This is a CBO number that's been done of what would happen under the case of full repeal, and Brookings just came out with a study last week essentially validating it. So these are not crazy-eyed liberals.
Harold,
I would say one thing. The CBO is coming out today with an assessment of this, not a full score, but an assessment. I just want to get that in. Go ahead.
He got that in, Harold.
Two quick questions.
I have one more chart.
I think
We know that. We know that. We're gonna get to all of your charts, Steve. But Harold has a question.
two quick ones as you're thinking about it. One, the Republicans complain that Medicaid spending is going to get out of control over the next several years. We can't sustain it. How do we address that? And two, who are the winners in Graham Cassidy? I mean, you have both Graham and Cassidy saying the states are going to win, but who are the real winners if indeed 30 million plus people are going to lose insurance?
You gave me the perfect lead-in, Harold, to my third chart.
Well, see, that's why sometimes you should allow questions from the
It's
audience.
like we planned it.
Look, Medicaid is obviously getting more and more expensive, and there are reforms to Medicaid that can and should happen. And indeed, the idea of giving the states some more flexibility over how they use Medicaid dollars is not a bad idea. But this is just a wholesale cutting of funding for expansion of Medicaid. So if you look here, you'll see who are the winners and losers. The dark blue states are the ones that are going to lose the most money. So, for example, by the time you get to the end, New York would lose $1,000 a person. California would lose $700 a person. Not coincidentally, these states are in blue, and they are blue. They are the states that expanded Medicaid. Who are the winners? They are the states that didn't expand Medicaid, like Texas, like Missouri, like Alabama. And they actually would get $300, $400, $500 more per person.
Technically, that's Mississippi, just so you know.
I'm sorry, I meant to say Mississippi. But it's not a coincidence that they're adding more money to the states that you've heard talk about, which are Alaska, Arizona, Maine, because they are actually losers under this current proposal. And actually, one of the bigger losers under this current proposal, ironically, is Kentucky, which I cannot see on my little screen, but you can hopefully see there, because Kentucky expanded Medicaid. They have a very well-functioning healthcare exchange, and so they would actually be a big loser in this as well.
And how interesting if you put up the, and Senator, you can speak to this,
Yes.
if you put up the chart again, 3 of the 4 states that are losers are states that helped Donald Trump win the Electoral College: Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania.
This whole thing is stunning. You know, I want to go back to Harold's question on Medicaid, because I would actually argue that certainly in Michigan, expanding Medicaid to people who are in minimum wage jobs to be able to take their child to the doctor rather than using the emergency room has saved the state of Michigan money. We have 50% fewer people walking into the emergency room that can't pay. The state budget has $435 million more in it next year in savings because they're not paying for uncompensated
So you have real numbers
care.
to show that
we
they're
have
saving.
real numbers, and 97% of the children in Michigan can now see a doctor, which is actually a good thing.
You bring up one of the, I think one of the most
should be a good
overlooked
thing.
things by so-called conservatives who suggest no health care coverage actually is more fiscally responsible coming from the federal government. We guarantee universal health care coverage in America now.
Right.
We just guarantee it in the least cost-efficient way possible. A mother, a single mom, can take her children
right.
to the emergency room at 11:30 at night, again, as sort of a first responder to their children's health issues, and then they'll get an Advil for $43. And then they will get a Band-Aid for, I don't know how much, 2020. We've seen the numbers. We've seen how inflated it is when we treat it that way instead of having a holistic approach that actually will make more fiscal sense. Make more sense health-wise, it'll make more fiscal sense too, won't it?
Joe, you are absolutely right. I mean,
you.
what we see, well,
Steve
I'm not
Ratner's
saying
never
you're
said
always
that to
right.
me.
Yeah,
This case.
Joe's favorite words.
yeah, I'm not always, but let me
This
just say,
one case.
yeah. It's amazing to me that Republicans think by ignoring health care, it just goes away and nobody will get sick.
Yeah.
And that's not what happens. If you ignore it, you just pay for it in the most expensive way, using
Right.
emergency rooms. If you can actually have somebody go to a doctor or a senior get preventative screenings, or you get your cancer screenings rather than waiting till stage 4 cancer, it actually saves money. And
It's the same thing with diabetes, where you don't fund what's required up front to prevent diabetes, but then after somebody gets diabetes, then we all as a country, then at that point, will pay for the amputation, pay for the kidney
Exactly.
dialysis, pay for the most expensive parts of the disease, instead of, it's Benjamin Franklin, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
question.
And right now, we're spending all of our money on the cure. Again, it's important to remember, again, for conservatives who think that just saying no is going to save money, we spend more money per country, as a country, than any country on the planet per person on health care. And in part, it's because we don't have a system that actually looks at it universally,
Right.
holistically, and figures out how to take care of the neediest in the most cost-efficient way.
there is no question about that. And we've actually seen healthcare costs stabilize in the last number of years when more people could actually go to the doctor rather than the emergency room. We have real numbers on that. This
Right.
isn't making it up. Somehow people think that ignoring this is that nobody's going to get sick. What we ought to be doing is focusing on how do you lower costs, by the way, prescription drug costs being the largest driver. And secondly, how do you increase coverage in a way that makes sense? And we've got plans to do that.
Senator Debbie Stabenow, thank you so much. Great to have you on the set
Thank
with
you.
us. And thank you for the charts, Steve.
You're welcome.
Steve,
They
the
were
charts were
excellent.
extraordinary.
All three of them?
Amazing.
They were. And,
All three of them.
Still ahead this morning.
Debbie and Harold
Yeah.
were freshmen. They came
We
in
were.
Yeah.
in the class of 96.
did.
You know whose office I got my first term in Congress?
Who?
A young Joe Scarborough.
Oh my gosh. Were there any secrets
What
in the
did you
corner?
find?
Yeah.
I think I had such a successful first term.
Candy wrappers.
It's kind of like Steve Bannon's apartment. He was
right.
cleaning it up. There were
That's right.
padlocks
Acid.
everywhere.
All right, still ahead this
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.